guitars and keyboards, piano, that sort of instrument, provide the melody for a track. So they provide the main sort of flavour, if you like. They're the ones that people are going to hear the most of. So, therefore, it's worth making sure that they sound right on the record. They've got to sound right for the record, but they've also got to sound right on the record. As they're the main sort of musical melody, it's important firstly that they don't clash with the vocals, so it's worth making sure that they don't. And secondly, they've got to flow well with the rhythm section. And we're going to be thinking about how to balance up these melodic instruments. Now, electric guitar and electric keyboard are kind of similar in terms of the approach that we use to record them. Acoustic guitar and piano are kind of similar in terms of the approach. So we're going to have a look at these two areas as we go through this video. When it comes to recording guitar, you don't need a fancy amp. It's helpful if you've got a decent one. I mean, this is an entry-level Marshall. It's at least 15 years old now. It's nothing special, but it does a very good job. So if you can borrow an amp or something like that, if you haven't got one like this, then that would be ideal. It doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles. In fact, I would recommend that it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. You can add effects later in Audacity, or whatever DAW you're using. So I would go for the simplest sound that you can manage. So I'm going for straight through, classic crunch. Another thing that's worth bearing in mind here is that the simpler sound is the better sound, and also that includes when it comes to things like EQing. It's tempting to line in a guitar through like an amp modeler or something like that. I really wouldn't do it. You're better off using an actual amp, even if it's a crummy amp, because it's going to sound more in keeping with the rest of the recording. Otherwise you've got something that sounds all flashbang mixed in with those drums and things that are going to sound, you know, rough and ready. Tip number 2. Set your gain, if you're using distortion, for the loudest thing that you're going to be doing, the most distorted thing you're going to be doing in the song. So I'm going to be soloing a bit later. So I've got the gain set there, and that's what it sounds like with my guitar on full volume. I'm now going to roll the volume down to about 4 to play the actual song. That is actually going to make it sound clearer. If you're playing hard stuff as well, it actually makes it sound heavier than if you use loads and loads of gain all the way through. So that's the tip for that one. Now I've muted my drum kit here because I don't want any sympathetic sounds coming through. I've got the mic nice and close to the amp, and I've got the amp turned up as loud as I can get away with, so that there's no weird sounds that get in around the outside. I'm then going to record it straight through. However, at the bit where the solo will be, I'm going to stop playing, and then I'm going to record a second layer with the solo in it, because I don't want to have to... Well, it would be nice to be able to control the solo separately, and you'll see why when we do the engineering and the mastering. So one layer for the main melody, and another layer for the solo. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll save it, and we'll be ready to add the solo in the same way. And then we can move on to have a look at keyboards and acoustic guitar. Top tips for recording guitars: if you've got more than one guitarist, try to get different guitar sounds to each other. Best way to start with this is if you've got 2 guitarists, give one of them a guitar with a humbucker, one of them a guitar with a single coil pickup. It means you're going to get more definition between the sounds. If that can't be done, think about the difference between, say, something like an Ibanez and a Gibson. They're going to sound different, so even if you end up swapping guitars for it, it's worth trying. It's also worth considering as well that different amps will make different sounds, so maybe try using 2 different amps if you've got 2 guitarists. but if you're limited on equipment, go for 2 different guitars if possible. Other things to consider: if you're going to be adding effects into your sound, so if you normally play with delay or chorus or anything like that, try adding it in afterwards, if at all possible. It does give you more control over your sound. And also it gives you a chance to actually reflect on what you're playing. You might think, actually, I don't need this effect, or this effect might sound good at this point. You know, it's all a good learning process. And finally, when solos are being played, you know, you're rolling up the volume on your guitar to play your solo, but if you've got a guitar in the background, try rolling down the volume, so you're actually on an almost clean sound underneath the solo. It'll give the solo more definition, it'll give the rhythm a more rhythmic sound. It just creates a nice dynamic within the mix as well. Okay, so for acoustic guitar, what we're looking at is having the condenser mic as close to the 12th fret as possible. So, a few inches away. You don't want to be right over the sound hole. It tends to make it a very boomy sound. You can, if you've got an electric pickup, you can direct line it in, but it tends to sound a bit off compared to doing it through the microphone. But try both. Try both. It's not like the keyboard, which is definitely better going through an amp. For a piano, best place to put this is to, if you can open up the top, if it's an upright piano, put it facing in but about a couple of feet out, or you can have it over your shoulder as you're playing at the keys. Either's good. Now I'm going to be recording to all the tracks I've already recorded, including the electric guitar, so I've turned the volume as far down as I can on my headphones so that not very much is going to wash through into this microphone. I mean, it's rough and ready, but we still want to get the best sound we can. So let's record. And once we're happy with that, we can move on to do the keyboards and do the vocals. Tips for acoustic guitar. Things to bear in mind with acoustic guitar is because you'll be doing it with a microphone and acoustic guitars aren't massively loud, you might pick up background noises. So you've got to watch out for laptop screens, light bulbs which will create an electric hum. Try not to move around too much in a chair, that sort of thing. If you're sat on it, try not to move on the floorboards, or you'll pick up creaks and bumps and that kind of thing. When it comes to production as well, you'll find that acoustic guitars can either sound very thin or they can sound very boxy and boomy. So when you're first recording it, do a few test records and move the guitar around within the room to make sure it sounds quite bright but not too thin. Keyboards operate in pretty much the same way as guitars. As you can see, I've got the output running out into the amp. Now the reason for this, rather than running it in line in, is that if you line it in, often it can sound way too big, way too powerful, and it ends up sounding very, very odd. So we're lining it in through the amp. Yeah, it'll give it a bit more of a sort of rough and ready sound, but there's nothing wrong with that. So just like we did with the guitars, I'm going to record the keyboards. And when we're happy with it, we can move on to vocals. Top tips for keyboards. Really, I just think about effects. You know, if you're going to add effects in, try doing it later. Go for the simplest keyboard sound you can go for, and then add echo, reverb, chorus, tremolo, anything like that afterwards. Particularly if it's like an organ sound, you might find that you play it, you listen back to the mix, and suddenly it just disappears because it's got a really effect-heavy sound. So just be aware of that. You want something that's got good definition. And I'd avoid going for really overproduced sounding keyboard sounds as well. Go for something that sounds clear and simple, and it tends to sound better in the mix. So we've now looked at the electric guitar, the keyboard, the acoustic guitar, and we've talked about the piano in this video to put on top of the drums and the bass guitars. And that means next time we're going to be having a look at vocals and how to fit those in. So, thanks very much for watching. See you next time.